Alright, 8th graders, I'm going to show you a very important skill today. It's how to simplify radicals. It seems like in 8th grade I teach you a whole bunch of separate tools, and all they end up being for is for solving equations. So you're going to simplify radicals, you're going to learn this skill now, but it's really not until later in high school that you're going to actually solve equations with them. And I think I can show you an example of that too. So, of a high school one. But here's the basic idea. What is a radical? This is a radical, which you would probably at this point call the square root sign. But remember, there are other versions, right? This is a cube root. That's a fourth root. That's a fifth root. But for right now, for this week, we're only going to talk about these guys. Make things a little bit simpler. So, for simplifying radicals, if you see a radical and it has one of the perfect squares under it, like let's say 64, then you know that the answer is 8. Or if I said, hey, what's the square root of 100? Square root of 100, that's 10. These are things, your assignment for Tuesday or Wednesday is a practice of these things, so you can kind of get them back into your head. It really is super handy to have them memorized. But there's another thing we do with radicals. It's going to seem a little bit weird at first. So I'm going to show you a couple examples here. So, very simple example. What is the square root of 12? Well, if you plug that into a calculator, get my handy dandy calculator here, clear that stuff off of there. Square root of 12 is 12 and 3.46410. So I'm going to write 3.464. That'll be enough. But in some of the math that you do in high school, some of the equations that you solve, it is a useful thing to be able to know how to simplify this radical. And I'm going to show you how that works. I know that 12 is equal to 3 times 4. I also know that 12 is equal to 2 times 6. But that one really isn't useful to me. This one is useful to me because it has a 4 in it. So that means that I can rewrite the square root of 12 like so. The square root of 4 times the square root of 3 is equal to the square root of 12, right? And now I can divide it out like that. There's a rule that says it's okay for me to do that. And it does work. Like if you put this into the calculator, you will get the same thing, that same number. But, this is something I can simplify. The square root of 4 is just 2. 2 times the square root of 3 is equal to the square root of 12. So the simplification of the square root of 12 is 2 times the square root of 3. And watch too. Let's see. 3.464, check it out. 2 times second square root 3. Get out from under the bar. Boom. It's the same thing. But it's a simplification. And it gets really useful when you're doing equations and manipulating variables. So, let me show you another one. We'll do one that has 25 in it. So let's say, what is the square root of 125? Well, the square root of 125 is something with a whole bunch of decimal junk. I'm not going to worry about it. But I know that I can separate this into the square root of 5 times the square root of 25. And if you didn't know that looking at this, hopefully you know it's divisible by 5 and you can just kind of mess around with it. But it's 5 times 25 is 125. I can't do anything about that. That's just going to be decimal junk. But what about this guy? What is the square root of 25? The square root of 25 is just 5. So, square root of 5 times 5. So the simplification of the square root of 125 is 5 times the square root of 5. That's a basic example. Let me try one that's a little bit harder. Okay, how about, this will be the last example we do on this one too. Square root of 84. Ugh, I don't know what's in 84. Well, here, I'm going to divide by 2 and see what I get. I mean, I know it's even, right? So I'll divide by 2. 84 divided by 2 is 42. So what's the square root of 2 times the square root of 42? The 42, that's still annoying. I can divide by 2 again. That's equal to the square root of 2 times the square root of 21. So I'm going to take a second and just look at the factors of 84, basically. The factors of 84 that I've discovered so far are 2 times 2, right? Here's this one and that one. And then 21 is 3 and 7. I can't really do anything about these guys, but 2 times 2, isn't that 4? So, the square root of 84 is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 and 7. There's no squares in there. I can't do anything about that, so that's 21. So, the square root of 84 can be simplified to 2 times the square root of 21. Okay. In summary, for this little short video, well, it's not short, 8 minutes so far, we are talking about simplifying radicals. You will see numbers under the, I'll grab my scissors here to point with. That's a radical. We're only going to talk about square roots for this whole week, actually. The square root of 64 is 8, the square root of 100 is 10. It's handy dandy to memorize your square roots and perfect squares. But sometimes we have to simplify radicals for the purposes of solving equations. 12 is equal to 3 times 4. 4 is a perfect square. So if I take the square root of that, it's 2. And then the square root of 3 is just decimal junk. There's nothing I can do about that. 2 times the square root of 3 is a simplification of the square root of 12. Same thing down here. The square root of 125 is 5 times the square root of 5. And the square root of 84, after some messing around with some numbers over here, is 2 times the square root of 21. Okay. I'm going to try to find an example of some high school math for you guys so that you will understand the kind of things that you have to do later and why this skill is important. Okay. Talk to you later. See you hopefully for the live session tomorrow. Bye.